On behalf of the African American Heritage Month Committee, Dr. Davenport and Mrs. Joycelyn Phillips, Faculty Development, and Dr. Bredesen, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the discussion of the status of Africana studies. I thank you all for coming. I am Dr. Janice Collins from the Department of Journalism and Women's Studies, and I'm your moderator for this exciting and wonderful event. I expect we will learn much about Africana studies on many levels this evening, and since we really don't have a whole lot of time, we're going to go ahead and get started on a couple of things. How this is going to work, we're going to have the introductions, and then we will have brief introductory statements by our panelists. Then we'll have a few questions that I will pose to them to kind of get us started. But then after that, we're going to open the floor up so we can just have really a discussion between the panelists and each other about Africana studies and all that it entails as much as we can in the next 50 minutes. So, in light of that, when you ask a question or make a comment or a statement, I'm going to ask that you hold it between 30 and 60 seconds. I'm a broadcast journalist, so not only can I tell 30 or 60 seconds, I brought my stopwatch. So hopefully we won't have to do that, but just try to, so we can get a lot of diverse voices in here, let's try to keep it as concise as possible. So let us begin with the introduction of our panelists. Our special guests tonight are extremely qualified to speak on the subject that we are exploring, and we are extremely pleased to have them as our guests tonight. Gracing our stage, we have Dr. Sundiata Cha. Did I say that right?
Yes, you did.
Okay. From the University of Illinois, Champaign-Urbana, right up the street. Dr. Cha teaches in the Departments of African American Studies and History at the university and is sitting president of the National Council for Black Studies. Among his numerous and impressive achievements, he has authored the award-winning America's First Black Town, Brooklyn, Illinois, published dozens of articles in the leading academic journals in Black Studies and U.S. history, including the Black Scholar and Journal of African American History. He recently guest edited a special edition of the Black Scholar entitled Defending Ethnic Studies and Academic Freedom. His BA is from Tougaloo College in Political Science, a master's from Sangamon State University in Political Science, and his doctorate is from U of I Champaign-Urbana in History. He also has advanced certificates in Black Studies from Northeastern University and the University of West Virginia. We also have with us Father Brown from Southern Illinois University, Carbondale, joining us tonight. Father Brown, a native from East St. Louis, is a Catholic priest with an extensive academic and pastoral career. He earned his BA in philosophy from St. Louis University, a master's degree in creative writing from Johns Hopkins University, and a master's degree in Afro-American Studies, and a PhD in American Studies from Yale University. Father Brown has taught at Creighton University, University of Virginia, Xavier University in New Orleans, where he was also the director of the Institute for Black College Studies.
Catholic.
Beg your pardon? Black Catholic College Studies. Thank you. Presently, Father Brown holds the positions of professor and chair in the Africana Studies Department at Southern Illinois University at Carbondale. Among his many achievements that are also quite impressive include 2 5-booklet series in adult spiritual development, focusing on Black Catholic spirituality, appointed Congress liturgist for both the 7th and 9th National Black Catholic Congress in New Orleans and Chicago. Father Brown has published many articles in African American literary criticism and cultural studies, and has authored such works as Accidental Grace, To Stand on the Rock, Meditation on Black Catholic Identity, and Sweet, Sweet Spirit. It is also believed that Father Brown is the longest running chair in any department of African American Studies, holding fast for 15 years. So, please help me welcome our panelists today, this evening. We will begin with short statements, introductory statements from each one of our panelists, please.
Before your battery runs out.
Oh, yeah.
Well, first I would emphasize this, that
Black Africana Studies is a problem-solving discipline, and that it kind of combines research and teaching and reparative justice. It looks at the past and present social historical experiences of people of African descent. So the big point here is that it's about solving problems, right? The second point that I would make is that there's an emphasis also on telling the story from the vantage point of African people. Now here's where it gets a little bit tricky, right? The first thing we have to understand is the diversity of people of African descent. But within that diversity, there's very clear unity, right? So that on the one hand, we're looking at a diverse population, and we're looking at people of African descent across nationality or region, across class, gender, sexuality, ideological locations, but we're also focusing on them as a group and those things that unite them. So I'll stop there.
Okay.
I could too. I like that. It solves problems. Academically and culturally, I believe that the starting point is always a very simple sentence. Who defines the terms by which we live? I write that on the board at the beginning of every class I teach and share it in many lectures and workshops like this. Who defines the terms? A lot of different people talk about who writes history, who controls the meta-narrative, all these big terms in there. I just want to know, when we're telling the stories, who told the story, what was left out, and who benefited from the way it was told and the way it was edited. That to me is one of the problems that Africana, African American Black Studies is supposed to be solving. Getting the stories told with all the complexity, but not saying that absolutely everybody on the boat was a king or a queen or a prince or a princess. Let me just know the whole story. If I'm smart enough, I can figure out what conclusions I'm supposed to draw. But when you either deny or suppress part of the story, none of us are the richer. At one talk I gave to a couple thousand people in Los Angeles one day, I said to them, I want everybody in this room who's descended from a slave to raise your hands. Oh, lots of mulatto, chocolate, and cinnamon-colored hands raised. I said, now everybody in this room who was descended from a slave owner, raise your hands. You know, a few very courageous Caucasian hands went up in the air. I said, some of y'all lying. Some of y'all should have had your hands up the whole time. The black folks and the white folks got the same parents a lot of times. But we only tell half that story. When you talk about gender oppression, there's also sexual oppression. Tell all of it, and if we're smart, we'll deal with it. The other thing that I think is crucial to this field is understanding that it is a direct challenge to Western European philosophical concepts. We are not in binary opposition. We are a blended, multiple rhythmed culture. Both and, never either or. Once we can break down these false categories, which really oppress and sustain denials, then we're on to an exciting journey, and everything fits everything else.
Okay, great. Yeah.
Yeah, let me add that, you know, one of the things we have to be very, very clear on is that people's social historical experiences identify and define the terms by which they should be analyzed. So, classic kind of example. If you take the African American people and you look at their social historical experiences, and then you compare that to the experiences of white Americans, U.S. history, then it becomes clear that the black experience is so fundamentally different, right, than the U.S. historical experience, and it poses certain challenges that we can't use the same periodization scheme, we can't use the same concepts. Example, at the end of the Civil War, say the period from the late 1870s through the early 1920s. It's a period that in American history is generally called the industrializing era. Sometimes, or at least a part of it, is called the progressive era. Mark Twain called the period the, he said that this is the age where everything glittered, right? But it wasn't golden. And what he's trying to get at is that this is a period in which the robber barons emerged, and the emphasis is on the disparities in wealth, right? And so he tried to talk about it as a period in which there was a kind of falsity. Well, for African Americans, an African American historian, Rayford Logan, called this period the nadir, which means the lowest point. Because what he focused on was that for African Americans, this is a moment when, say, the decade of the 1890s, between January 1st, 1890 and December 31st, 1899, every 2.5 days, a black man, woman, or child is lynched somewhere in America. This is a period where black people move from slavery to sharecropping, and we kind of have to flip the coin.
Which was?
And say which was worse, right? In some ways. It's a period in which black people are denied the right to vote. It's the period in which apartheid, which we call segregation, emerges. So that those experiences are so fundamentally worse than anything that white Americans went through that we can't use the same periodization scheme and we can't use the same concepts. And at the end of the day, the concepts that we use fundamentally challenge the essence of America, because what they do and what our experiences does is that it exposes the fact that America has never been a democracy, right? Up through 1830, only 5% of the people could vote. Black people couldn't vote, then black men can vote. So you get the point.